The rain had stopped just as I reached the cemetery gates, though the clouds still hung heavy, as if refusing to let the day move on. My umbrella trembled slightly in my hand, not from the drizzle, but from the way my fingers wouldn't stop shaking. Even after 3 months, coming here still felt unreal, like walking into someone else's sorrow. My husband, Edward, was gone, and I still couldn't say the words aloud without feeling like they'd choke me. I walked down the narrow stone path, my boots sinking slightly in the wet earth. The air smelled of mud and lilies, sharp and soft all at once. Edward used to hate lilies. "They smell like endings," he'd say with that half-smile that always made me laugh. And yet, here they were, his grave covered in them, laid by my own trembling hands week after week. It felt cruel, somehow fitting. As I approached his grave, I saw her, a woman, standing exactly where I usually stood. She was dressed in black, her veil fluttering faintly in the wind, and she was holding something small, like a folded letter. My steps slowed, the air tightening in my chest. At first, I thought maybe she was lost. Maybe she'd mistaken Edward's grave for another. But then I saw her lips move. She was whispering his name. Edward. My Edward. I froze, not 10 feet away, and watched her trace the carved letters on the tombstone. Edward Michael Halden, beloved husband, friend, and dreamer. She touched the word husband like it meant something personal, something sacred. My breath caught. I took a cautious step forward. "Excuse me," I said softly, my voice breaking through the quiet. "Can I help you?" She turned, and in that single horrifying moment, I forgot how to breathe. Her eyes were swollen red from crying, but behind the grief was something else, something cold, steady, and painfully familiar. She looked to be in her 40s, though her posture carried the exhaustion of someone who had been mourning much longer than I had. Her lips trembled, but she didn't look confused. She looked resolved. "You must be Claire," she said, her voice rough but sure. I frowned. Yes. How do you know my name?" She smiled sadly, stepping closer. "Edward talked about you. A lot. Said you were kind. The words made no sense. Talked? As if he'd spoken to her before he died." I blinked, feeling the edges of panic creeping in. "I'm sorry, who are you?" She hesitated, then looked down at the grave again. "My name is Lillian," she whispered, "and I'm Edward's real wife." The world tilted. I swear it did. The cemetery, the gravestones, the rain-washed earth, all of it blurred. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, the cruel joke, something. But her face stayed still, her eyes glistening with grief so raw it mirrored my own. I let out a hollow laugh. "That's impossible," I managed. "I was married to Edward for 27 years. She nodded softly. "So was I." The wind picked up, tossing her veil across her face, but she didn't flinch. My stomach twisted as 1,000 images flashed through my mind. Our wedding, the house we built, the anniversaries, the fights, the nights he promised me forever. What was she saying? What kind of sick joke is this? I demanded. My voice cracked in the middle, half fury, half fear. Lillian's lips quivered. It's not a joke. I wish to God it was. I stepped back, my heart hammering. Show me proof, I said. Show me anything. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. My eyes widened. It was Edward, younger, smiling, his arm around her waist. But the real punch came when I saw the ring on his hand. Our wedding ring. I felt my knees weaken. No, I whispered. No, this isn't real. That photo could have been... It was taken in 1994, she said quietly. In Charleston, 2 years before your wedding, Claire. I stumbled backward. My chest felt tight, my vision flickering between her tear-streaked face and the cold marble of Edward's grave. He'd been in Charleston in 1994, he told me. It was a work trip, a design conference. I never questioned it. I never thought to. My heart broke in a new way, colder, sharper. He married me in June that year. Lillian continued softly. Under a different name, Edward Martin. We had a small ceremony. I have the papers, the rings, everything. I shook my head violently. You're lying. He would have told me. He would have told me. Her eyes filled again, spilling silent tears. He didn't tell you because he couldn't, she whispered. He had 2 lives, Claire, and I think he loved us both. The words shattered something in me. I turned away, gripping the iron fence beside the grave to steady myself. The sound of the rain returned, faint but relentless, tapping against the umbrella I'd dropped. I wanted to scream, to ask the heavens how I'd lived beside a stranger all these years. But no sound came, just a long, shaky breath that carried the weight of betrayal and disbelief. Lillian stepped closer but didn't touch me. I didn't come here to hurt you, she said softly. I just needed to say goodbye too. I couldn't move. My mind raced through every memory, his late nights, his sudden business trips, the unfamiliar numbers on phone bills I once brushed off. It all began to make a terrifying kind of sense. I turned to her again, my voice trembling. Did he have children with you? Her silence was the answer. My throat tightened. How many? 1, she said finally. A son. He's 26 now. 26. That would mean he was born a year after our marriage. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the damp grass beside the grave. The lilies crushed under my palms as I tried to steady my breathing. All those years, Edward had looked me in the eye and told me I was his only love. Every vow, every anniversary, every quiet whisper in the dark, it was all shared, split, duplicated. The thought made me sick. I stared at his name carved in stone, the man I thought I knew, my husband, my liar. I buried him, I said numbly. I paid for everything. The service, the headstone, the flowers. Where were you then? Her voice trembled. I didn't know he was gone. I found out last week through an old friend who saw the obituary. Her words sank deep, twisting the knife even further. I wanted to hate her, to shout at her for daring to exist, but her grief was as real as mine. I could see it the way her shoulders shook, the way she pressed her hand to her heart, as if to hold it together. We stood there, 2 broken women at the same grave, mourning the same man in different ways. The wind howled again, carrying a faint echo of thunder. Somewhere a church bell rang. Lillian whispered, "He used to bring me white roses. Said they meant truth." My chest clenched. Edward told me the same thing, but with lilies. Lilies meant purity, he'd said. The irony struck like lightning. A man who promised purity and truth, while living two lives built on lies. I looked up, tears burning hot against the cold rain. "I want to see everything," I said quietly. "The proof, the papers, the photos, all of it." Lillian nodded slowly. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "at his old cabin, the one near the lake." My stomach dropped. The lake cabin, the one Edward claimed was just for work. I had only been there once. He said it was too small, too messy for guests. Now I knew why. As I watched her walk away, her figure fading into the mist, a deep, cold certainty settled inside me. Edward had hidden more than a wife. He'd hidden a life, and I was going to uncover every piece of it. I didn't sleep that night. Not for a minute. The clock beside my bed ticked through every hour like it was mocking me. 1 a.m., 2, 3, every second dragged under the weight of what that woman Lillian had said. My husband's real wife. The phrase looped in my head until I could almost hear him saying it, whispering it in the dark. When the first light crept through the curtains, I got up, packed my coat, and left before the world was awake. I didn't even bother with breakfast. My stomach was too twisted for food. The drive to the lake cabin took 2 hours, though it felt like years. The sky was a dull gray, and the trees leaned over the road like old men whispering secrets. I had been there once before, years ago. Edward had brought me when we were first married, saying he wanted to show me where he did his thinking. He'd built that cabin himself, or so he claimed. Back then, I thought it was romantic. A man who worked with his hands, who carved out solitude in a noisy world. But now, that same thought made bile rise in my throat. He hadn't built it for solitude. He'd built it for hiding. When I reached the lake, fog sat heavy on the water. The cabin stood on the edge, half hidden by pine trees. Its wooden boards looked darker than I remembered, aged and damp. My heart raced as I stepped out of the car. Every sound, the crunch of gravel, the creak of the porch echoed too loudly in the quiet. Lillian's car was already there, a small silver sedan. She stood near the door, her face pale, her posture guarded. "You came," she said softly, like she hadn't been sure I would. "I had to," I replied. "If you're telling the truth, I need to see it for myself." She nodded and motioned me inside. The door groaned open, releasing a faint scent of old wood, coffee, and something else, something like Edward's aftershave, the one he wore only on special days. I froze at the smell, my mind pulling me backward in time to dinners, anniversaries, quiet Sunday mornings. For a brief moment, it felt like he was here again, alive. And lying still, Lillian walked to a small wooden table cluttered with papers. "This is everything," she said. "Marriage certificate, photos, letters." I stepped closer, my eyes scanning the yellow documents. My breath hitched when I saw the marriage certificate. Edward Martin and Lillian Grace Moore. His signature was identical to the one on our own wedding papers. Same slant, same curve on the M. My hands trembled as I picked up one of the letters. It was dated 1996. My love, I'm sorry I can't come this weekend. Things are complicated. But know this, nothing changes what I feel for you. You're my beginning and my end. It was signed E.M., his old initials. I sank into a chair, my legs weak. He said he never kept secrets from me, I whispered. Lillian sat across from me, her hands folded tightly. He told me the same thing. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched, filled with the ghost of his voice. I wanted to hate her, but all I saw was another woman betrayed by the same man. Finally, I asked, "When did you find out about me?" 2 years ago, she said quietly. I saw a picture online, an article about Edward's design firm. You were standing next to him at some award ceremony. I recognized him instantly, though he looked older. I thought maybe he had divorced me in secret. Started over. Her voice cracked. But when I called the old number, it was disconnected. I stared at her. And you didn't confront him? I tried, she whispered. I came here once just like now. But he wasn't here. A week later, I got a letter. He said I was better off forgetting him, that he was sick. He didn't say what kind of sickness. My heart clenched. Edward had been sick cancer, stage 4. I'd nursed him through the worst of it, sat beside him every night until he took his last breath, but he hadn't mentioned her, not once, not even in his final confession. I got up and began walking around the cabin, touching everything, his tools, his books, the old kettle on the stove. Every item felt like a lie. Then my eyes landed on a small chest in the corner, covered by a dusty blanket. "What's that?" I asked. Lillian frowned. "I don't know. I've never opened it." I knelt, pulled the blanket away, and opened the latch. Inside were photos, hundreds of them. Edward and Lillian, Edward and me, Edward alone by the lake, 2 lives tangled together like vines. I picked up one photo and gasped it was of Edward holding a baby boy. The same boy I'd seen once in a picture frame on his office desk. He told me it was his nephew. Lies upon lies. Lillian knelt beside me. "That's our son, Nathan," she said softly. "He looks like him, doesn't he?" He did. God help me, he did. Tears burned my eyes. "So all these years, you lived without him?" She nodded. "He sent money sometimes. Letters too, until about 10 years ago. Then nothing. I thought maybe he'd died, until that obituary. The cabin felt suffocating suddenly. I walked to the window and pushed it open, letting the cold air slap my face. Across the lake, the fog was lifting, revealing the water's surface, a mirror reflecting the storm inside me. Lillian came beside me. "I don't think he meant to hurt us," she said quietly. "Edward, he was weak, not cruel." I turned to her, my voice trembling with anger. "Weak? He lied to us both. He built 2 marriages, 2 homes, 2 lives, and buried the truth in between. That's not weakness. That's betrayal." Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "He left this for me. Maybe it's for both of us now. The paper was yellowed, the edges soft from age. My name was written on the front in Edward's familiar handwriting. My breath caught. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "He sent it to me the week before he died," she said. "I couldn't open it alone. I took it carefully, my fingers trembling. The seal broke with a faint tear. Inside was a single folded letter and a key. To my two greatest loves, if you've found each other, then the truth is out. I lived in halves, one heart divided between two souls. I never wanted to lie, but I didn't know how to stop. This key unlocks what's left of me. E. The room spun. A key. To what?" I looked at Lillian. "Do you know what it opens?" She shook her head slowly. "No, but I think he wanted us to find out together." The key gleamed faintly in the dim light, simple and silver. It looked old, but its purpose pulsed in the air like a secret waiting to break free. For the first time, I felt something sharper than grief, curiosity. If Edward had built his life on lies, then this key might open the one door he never meant either of us to walk through. I turned toward Lillian. "Then we'll find it," I said. "Whatever he's hidden, it ends now." And as the rain began to fall again against the windows, I knew this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about the truth, and whether I was strong enough to face it. The next morning felt like the beginning of a storm, one that didn't come from the sky but from inside me. The key hadn't left my hand since Lillian gave it to me. I kept turning it over and over, as if the metal might whisper its secret. It was small, silver, old-fashioned, the kind you'd use for a chest or a door that was meant to stay locked forever. Lillian and I met again at the cabin just after dawn. The fog over the lake was thick, the air cold enough to sting. She looked as tired as I felt, eyes red, lips pale, that haunted expression neither of us could shake. "Did you figure anything out?" she asked quietly as I stepped out of the car. I shook my head. "No, but I can feel it. He left something here." We searched the cabin again, room by room. I checked drawers, lifted floorboards, pressed along the walls for hollow spaces. Nothing. Lillian rummaged through the study, flipping through books and papers that smelled faintly of cedar and dust. The silence between us grew heavier with each failed attempt. Finally, I sank onto Edward's old armchair, staring at the firewood stacked neatly by the hearth. That's when something caught my eye, a strange seam running behind the bookshelf. It looked off, as if someone had pushed the unit slightly away from the wall, then tried to realign it. "Lillian," I whispered, "help me with this." We both grabbed the edges of the shelf and pulled. It didn't move at first, but when I pressed against one side, something clicked. The shelf swung outward like a door, revealing a narrow passage behind it. My breath caught. "Oh my God," Lillian murmured. Inside was a small, windowless room. The air was cold, stale, untouched for years. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, its pull cord swaying slightly from the draft. I tugged it, and the bulb flickered to life, casting a yellow glow across a desk, an old filing cabinet, and several boxes stacked neatly in one corner. The room smelled of paper, ink, and secrets. I stepped inside slowly, my heart thudding. Every inch of that hidden space screamed Edward, the precision, the order. The way everything was labeled with his neat handwriting. On the desk sat a leather journal and a small wooden box with a lock the perfect fit for the key in my hand. I froze, staring at it. "This must be it," I whispered. Lillian stood behind me, clutching her coat. "Then open it." I slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly, turning with a soft click. The lid lifted smoothly, as if it had been waiting for me. Inside were letters, photographs, and a flash drive modern technology sitting beside old paper, like two worlds colliding. At the very top lay a folded note addressed simply, "To the Truth." My hands shook as I opened it. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. I never meant for the lies to grow this big. What started as a mistake became a life. I loved you both, in different ways, but what I did can't be forgiven. There's something neither of you know. The truth isn't about who I married, it's about who I am." The letter ended abruptly. No signature, no explanation. I looked at Lillian, confused. "Who he is?" She frowned. "What does that mean?" We dug through the box, desperate for clarity. Inside were documents, passports, one in the name of Edward Martin Halden, and another, older one, in the name Ethan Moore. Two different men, same photograph, same eyes. My stomach dropped. He wasn't even who he said he was. Lillian gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. "Ethan Moore was my husband's name," she whispered. "That's what was on our marriage license." I looked back at the second passport. Edward Halden. My husband. My entire life with him built on a name that wasn't real. My hands trembled as I lifted another envelope from the box. Inside was a birth certificate, Edward's real one, and that's when I saw it. A different date of birth, a different town, different parents. "He reinvented himself," I said softly, more to myself than to her. "He built two lives, from the ground up." Lillian sank into the nearest chair, staring blankly at the papers. But why? What was he running from? The question hung between us, heavy and sharp. I reached for the journal. Its cover was worn smooth, the leather soft from years of use. Inside were handwritten entries spanning decades, starting from the early 1,990 seconds. The first page read, "I thought leaving the past would free me. But every time I look at their faces, I remember what I did." I flipped through the pages quickly, scanning lines that grew darker, more desperate with time. "They think I'm a husband, a father, but I'm just a man hiding behind a name. I never wanted to hurt them. I just wanted a second chance. If the truth comes out, they'll both hate me, and maybe that's what I deserve." Then, near the end, a passage written just weeks before he died. "There's a file in the safe deposit box. It explains everything. Claire deserves to know the truth, but it might destroy her." I stopped. "Safe deposit box?" Lillian leaned in. "Where?" The next line gave the answer. "Account Hessian 379, Brighton Savings Bank." I stared at the words, numb. The truth was bigger than just betrayal. It was buried in a bank vault somewhere, waiting for us to unearth it. Lillian looked at me, her voice barely above a whisper. "We have to go there." I nodded slowly. "Tomorrow." We spent the rest of the day going through the files, piecing together fragments of the man we thought we knew. There were bank statements, property deeds, letters signed with initials that weren't his. Everything pointed to a man who'd spent half his life erasing himself and building a new version. But why? As the sun began to sink, I found a small photo tucked between two envelopes, Edward holding a baby I didn't recognize. Not Nathan, a different child, smaller, fragile, a hospital tag visible on its wrist. The date on the back said 1988. Lillian frowned. That's not Nathan. He wasn't born until 97. My voice came out a whisper. Then who is this? Lillian didn't answer. She just looked at the photo, her expression shifting from confusion to fear. That night, after she left, I sat alone in the cabin, the journal open on my lap, the key still warm from my hand. Outside, the lake was perfectly still, too still. I could almost hear Edward's voice in the silence, whispering from somewhere beyond the grave. If you've found each other, then the truth is out. And for the first time, I realized he hadn't just meant our marriages. He meant something much darker, something that connected us long before either of us said, "I do." The next morning, I woke to the soft patter of rain against the window panes. The cabin felt colder than before, as if Edward's secrets had seeped into its wooden bones overnight. The journal still lay open on the table beside me, its last entry underlined twice. Account Hashan 379, Brighton Savings Bank. I traced the words with my finger, feeling the weight of them. My husband, no. The man I thought was my husband had lived behind names, lies, and unfinished truths. And somewhere, behind the heavy steel of a bank vault, sat the final piece of the story he'd never told. Lillian arrived around 8, clutching her umbrella like a shield. Her eyes were hollow from lack of sleep, her lips trembling with nerves. "Are you sure about this?" she asked softly as she stepped inside. "No," I admitted, "but we have to know." The drive to Brighton took an hour and a half. Neither of us spoke. The silence was heavier than words could ever be. Outside, the rain blurred the world into a gray smear, and I found myself gripping the steering wheel tighter every time I thought of Edward's voice, his calm, gentle tone, the one that used to make me feel safe. How could that voice have belonged to a man capable of building a life on falsehoods? When we finally reached the bank, the old brick building stood quietly at the corner of a narrow street. It looked ordinary, harmless even, but I knew better now. Nothing about Edward's world was ordinary. We walked through the double glass doors and approached the counter. The clerk, a young woman with kind eyes, smiled politely. "Good morning. How can I help you?" I hesitated before speaking. "I need access to safe deposit box number 1379. It belonged to my late husband, Edward Halden." The woman nodded. "Do you have identification and the key?" I handed her both. She examined them carefully, then glanced at her computer screen. "I'll need a moment to confirm." My pulse raced as she typed. Beside me, Lillian stood rigid, her hands clasped tight. I could hear her breathing quicken. Finally, the clerk looked up. "The account is active. Mr. Halden listed 2 authorized contacts, Claire Halden and Lillian Moore." The world stopped for a second. Lillian and I exchanged a stunned glance. He had planned for this. He had expected us to find each other. "Right this way, ladies," the clerk said gently, leading us through a secure door and down a narrow hallway lined with metal boxes. She stopped halfway down and gestured toward one number 1379. "Take your time." When she left, the silence returned. The metallic scent of the vault filled the air, cold and sterile. I slid the key into the lock. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped it. Lillian steadied me, her hand briefly touching mine, a strange comfort from someone who had every right to despise me. The lock clicked, and I pulled the box free. It was heavier than I expected. We carried it to the small table in the corner, and for a long moment neither of us moved. Then, slowly, I lifted the lid. Inside lay a stack of envelopes, a flash drive, and a small velvet pouch. On top sat another letter addressed to both of us, written in Edward's familiar, steady hand. I unfolded it carefully. "Claire and Lillian, if you're here, then you've already seen what I hid. I never meant to destroy your lives, but I knew the truth would eventually reach you. Before you hate me entirely, please understand why I did what I did. My name was never Edward Halden or Ethan Moore. Those were lives I borrowed to survive. Decades ago, before either of you knew me, I was part of something that went terribly wrong. People died. And I ran from guilt, from justice, from myself. What I left in this box is the proof. I don't expect forgiveness, but maybe you'll understand that I wasn't just escaping my past, I was protecting you from it." I looked at Lillian, but she seemed frozen. "People died?" she whispered. "What does that mean?" I reached into the box and lifted a small folder labeled 1988, confidential. Inside were newspaper clippings, articles about a fire in a research facility in Georgia. The headline read, "3 dead in lab explosion, 1 missing, suspected foul play." There was a photo attached. And there he was, Edward, or whoever he truly was, standing in the background, younger but unmistakable. I skimmed the article. The explosion at Winton Biotech remains under investigation. A senior researcher, Thomas Everett, is presumed dead after disappearing following the incident. Thomas Everett. The name echoed in my mind like a curse. "Claire," Lillian said slowly, "look at the next page." I turned it over and my breath stopped. There was a police report, and next to the name Thomas Everett was a note, "Primary suspect in the fire case closed due to presumed death." My vision blurred. "He didn't die," I whispered. "He became Edward Halden." Lillian's hand flew to her mouth. "He killed them." "No." My voice trembled. "Maybe, I don't know." I reached for the velvet pouch and opened it. Inside was a gold locket, old, tarnished, engraved with the initials E. M. Inside were 2 photos, one of me, one of Lillian. He had carried us both, literally, close to his heart. I couldn't breathe. My throat felt tight, my eyes burning. There was one last envelope at the bottom of the box. It was addressed only to my son. Lillian's eyes widened. "Nathan," she whispered. I hesitated. "Do you want to open it?" She nodded and unfolded the letter with trembling hands. "Nathan, You'll hear things about me, things that may sound monstrous, but I need you to know I loved you. The fire, the names, the lies, it was all to protect you and the women who raised you. I never meant to make enemies, but they're still out there. If anything ever happens, go to Claire. She knows where to find the rest. Lillian's eyes met mine, terrified. What does he mean, the rest? Before I could answer, something thudded in the hallway. We both froze. A faint echo of footsteps followed, slow, deliberate, drawing closer. The bank vault wasn't supposed to have visitors. The air thickened. I slid the lid closed quickly and tucked the letter into my coat. "Who's there?" I called. My voice trembled. No reply. Just another slow step, closer now, metal on tile. Lillian grabbed my arm. "Claire." The footsteps stopped right outside the vault door. Then silence. After what felt like an eternity, the distant sound of the clerk's voice broke the tension. "Ladies, everything all right in there?" I exhaled shakily. "Yes, we're fine." When the door opened, the hallway was empty, no sign of anyone. We signed the papers and left, the box sealed again. But as we stepped out into the rain, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching us. In the car, Lillian whispered, "He said they're still out there." What if he wasn't lying? The windshield wipers kept a slow rhythm, the rain washing away the fog on the glass, but not the fear tightening in my chest. If he was telling the truth, I said quietly, then Edward's lies didn't die with him. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, long and low, like a warning from something or someone, waiting for us to dig too deep. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak in my house sounded like a whisper from Edward's past, the one he'd tried to bury under false names and stolen love. I sat by the window for hours, watching rain trace crooked paths down the glass, the letter to Nathan clenched in my hand. "They're still out there." Those 4 words played on a loop in my head until they became something darker than fear, a warning. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I called Lillian. "We need to find out what he meant. We can't stop now." Her voice on the other end was quiet, brittle. "You think someone's following us, don't you?" I hesitated, glancing toward the driveway where a black car had been parked since dawn. "I don't know," I said truthfully, "but I don't believe in coincidences anymore." She exhaled shakily. "Then we find out who Thomas Everett really was. We agreed to meet at my house. When she arrived, she looked even paler than before. I made coffee, though neither of us touched it. On the table lay all the papers we'd taken from the bank, the journal, the birth certificate, the fake passports, and that haunting folder marked 1988, confidential. Lillian stared at it. "You think the fire was his fault?" "I don't know," I whispered. "But it wasn't just a fire. Look." I pulled another article from the folder, one I hadn't noticed before. It was dated a week after the explosion. "Federal investigation closed after key witness vanishes." There was a photograph beneath the headline, a blurred image of a woman carrying a small child, leaving the courthouse. I leaned closer, and my blood ran cold. The woman looked like me. Not exactly, but close enough that it made my heart lurch. Same build, same brown hair, even the same coat I used to wear years ago. "That's impossible," Lillian breathed. "That picture's from the 80s. I swallowed hard. Maybe that's why he chose me. What do you mean? What if he met me because I looked like her? The woman in the article, whoever she was." The room fell silent. The only sound was the clock ticking too loudly in the background. Then, from outside, a car door slammed. Both our heads snapped toward the window. The same black sedan I'd noticed earlier was now parked across the street, engine off, tinted windows. My pulse quickened. "Stay here," I whispered. I stepped outside, pulling my coat tight around me. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of it, wet, metallic, uneasy. The car didn't move. I could see my reflection in its dark window, pale and distorted. Then the engine roared to life. The tires screeched, and the car sped off down the road. I stood frozen for a long time before going back inside. "It's nothing," I lied. "Just a car." But Lillian knew. Her hands trembled as she reached for another of Edward's documents. "He wasn't paranoid," she whispered. "He was scared. We spent the rest of the day digging deeper. The flash drive from the safe deposit box contained files, old emails, scanned documents, and a video file labeled confession. It took a moment for the screen to light up, and then there he was, Edward, alive in pixels. He looked older, frailer than I remembered, sitting in what looked like the lake cabin, the same bookshelf behind him, the same faint light from the window. "If anyone finds this, it means I couldn't finish what I started," he began, voice low, trembling. "My real name is Thomas Everett. I was part of a research team in Georgia, working on experimental toxins for industrial use. But one night there was a fire. It wasn't an accident. We were ordered to destroy everything. I tried to save the data and the people trapped inside, but I failed. 3 died, and the company blamed me." He paused, rubbing his forehead, his eyes hollow. "They sent people after me. I changed my name twice. Lillian, Claire, I never wanted to hurt you. You were my shelter from what I'd done. But they found me again last year. I could feel it. That's why I built this hidden room, why I left the letters. If they come, don't trust anyone. And don't go to the police, they're part of it too." The video glitched and ended abruptly, the screen going black. Lillian covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. He was terrified. I couldn't speak. My chest ached, my mind racing. All those nights he'd woken drenched in sweat, saying it was just a dream. It wasn't. It was memory. I turned toward the window again, half expecting that car to return. "He thought he was protecting us," I whispered, "but he only made us part of his mess." There was another file on the flash drive, a scanned letter addressed to someone named Dr. Howard Kingsley. The message was short. "If anything happens to me, the sample is still hidden. You know where?" "Sample?" Lillian repeated. I scrolled through the rest of the folder. There was one more file, a document marked Property Registry, Maplewood Storage. It hit me like lightning. The storage unit. I breathed. That's what the key opened before. The one he used to drive to alone. Lillian frowned. You think it's still there? Yes, I said firmly. And whatever's inside, that's what this was all about. She hesitated, fear flickering in her eyes. Claire, what if it's dangerous? He said people died in that fire. What if he brought something from there? I looked down at my trembling hands. Then we'll finally know what he died hiding. We drove to Maplewood just as dusk settled. The sky burned orange behind the trees, the air heavy with the scent of rain and oil. The storage facility sat at the end of a long gravel road, its rows of metal doors stretching into the distance. The number 27 glinted faintly under a flickering light. This is it, I said, stepping out. Lillian followed, her steps cautious. I have a bad feeling, she murmured. So did I, but curiosity had swallowed fear now. I unlocked the door, the metal screeching as it lifted. Inside was darkness and a faint chemical smell that stung the back of my throat. A single wooden crate sat in the middle of the room, covered with a tarp. We stepped closer. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. I pulled the tarp away. Underneath was a small metal container with faded warning labels. Biohazard, property of Winton Biotech, Lillian gasped. Oh my God, Claire! I reached out, running my fingers over the rusted lid. There were letters etched into the metal. Truth is never clean. And then, from somewhere behind us, came the sound of a car door slamming shut. We spun around. Headlights flared at the end of the row, blinding and unmoving. Lillian grabbed my arm. They found us. The air grew thick, the night alive with the low hum of an engine waiting in the dark. I whispered, "Run." But part of me knew it was already too late. The light from the car headlights burned through the mist like two unblinking eyes. Lillian froze beside me, her grip digging into my arm. For a moment, neither of us breathed. The engine idled, low and menacing, the rumble echoing off the metal storage doors. "Claire," she whispered, "what do we do?" I didn't answer. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. I glanced around. There was no other exit, just endless rows of steel doors and puddles glistening under the weak yellow lights. Whoever was in that car wasn't moving. They were watching, waiting. Then the headlights blinked off. Darkness swallowed everything. Lillian gasped, and I grabbed her hand. "Inside," I whispered. We ducked back into the unit and pulled the door halfway down, leaving just a sliver of air. My pulse throbbed in my throat. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching against the gravel. A man's voice broke through the silence, calm, deep. "Claire Halden, Lillian Moore, you shouldn't have opened it." My stomach turned to ice. "Who are you?" I shouted, though my voice cracked halfway. No answer, just the creak of another door opening somewhere nearby. Lillian clutched my sleeve. "It's them. Whoever Edward was running from?" I turned toward the metal crate, the biohazard label gleaming faintly under the dim light. The words on top, "Truth is never clean," seemed to pulse with meaning now. I realized the man outside wasn't just after us. He was after what Edward had hidden here. "Help me," I hissed, moving toward the crate. "We can't let them take it." Lillian hesitated but nodded. Together we pried the lid loose. A hiss of stale air escaped, and the chemical smell hit us full force. Inside were vials, small glass tubes filled with a dark amber liquid, and a sealed envelope marked, "For Nathan." Lillian's face went pale. He kept whatever it was from that lab. Before I could respond, the sound of metal scraping came from outside the storage unit beside ours being forced open. I shoved the vials back inside and grabbed the envelope. "We have to go. Now!" We sprinted out into the rain-slick rows, our shoes splashing through puddles. The car's headlights flared again behind us, blinding. A man in a dark coat stepped into view, shouting something we couldn't hear over the pounding of our footsteps. "Claire!" Lillian cried, stumbling on the gravel. I pulled her up and didn't look back. My only thought was escape. We reached my car at the edge of the lot and jumped in. My hands shook so badly it took 2 tries to fit the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life just as the other car lurched forward. "Hold on!" I yelled, flooring the gas. The tires spun, then caught. We shot forward, fishtailing on the wet road before speeding into the dark. In the rearview mirror, headlights followed for a moment, then vanished when we turned sharply onto the highway. Only then did I realize I was crying silent, unstoppable tears. Lillian sat beside me, breathing hard. "We can't go home," she said, "if they know who we are." "I know," I said, gripping the wheel tighter. "We'll go somewhere safe, somewhere Edward never took us." She looked down at the envelope in my lap. "Are you going to open it?" I nodded, still driving. The paper tore softly, revealing a single handwritten letter and an old photograph. The photo was of Edward No, Thomas, holding a baby, the same baby from the earlier photo. But now I could see more. The hospital tag clearly read Nathan Everett. I frowned. That doesn't make sense. Nathan was born years later. The letter inside was brief, written in the same tight script I'd come to know so well. "If you're reading this, then they've found the storage unit. The vials are not weapons, they're a cure. The fire at Winton wasn't to destroy toxins, it was to erase evidence of what we made, something that could have saved lives. I ran because they wanted control. I took the only remaining samples to protect my son. Nathan isn't just my child, he's the reason I did it. He carries the same condition the formula was meant to cure. Claire, if he ever needs it, the answer is in the vials. Protect them. Don't trust anyone." My hands tightened on the letter, the words blurring through tears. "He wasn't hiding something evil," I whispered. "He was hiding hope?" Lillian's voice broke. "You mean all this, his lies, his running it was to protect Nathan?" I nodded slowly. The truth felt heavier than all the lies combined. Edward Thomas hadn't been a monster or a coward. He'd been a desperate man caught between guilt and love, protecting 2 families from something too powerful for either of us to understand. But there was still the question of who was chasing us, and why. I pulled the car over by the side of a desolate road, rain pouring down harder now. My hands shook as I folded the letter and tucked it inside my coat. "We can't keep these vials," I said quietly. "They'll never stop coming if they know we have them." Lillian looked at me, wide-eyed. "Then what do we do?" I stared out at the dark lake, shimmering in the distance. "We finish what he started." We drove until dawn. The sun broke over the horizon, bleeding gold into the mist. When we reached the lake cabin, everything felt full circle the same place where it had all begun. I took the metal crate from the trunk, walked down to the edge of the dock, and stared into the still water. For a long moment I thought of Edward's smile, his laughter, his arms around me, and then I thought of Lillian, standing beside me, silent tears streaking her face. Two women united by the same love, the same betrayal, and now the same truth. "Goodbye," I whispered, pushing the crate into the water. It sank slowly, bubbles rising like ghosts before disappearing into the depths. Lillian placed her hand on my shoulder. He wanted to protect his son. Now it's done. We stood there until the ripples faded. The rain eased, replaced by a pale, trembling light. For the first time in months, my chest felt lighter. The truth had broken us, but it had also freed us. Before we left, I took one last look at the lake. I could almost see him there. In the reflection, half Edward, half Thomas smiling softly, as if to say thank you. Lillian and I drove away in silence, two widows carrying a secret the world would never know. Weeks later, I visited his grave again. The lilies had wilted, but someone had left a single white rose. I smiled faintly, knowing who it must have been. As I placed my hand on the cold stone, I whispered, "You were wrong, Edward. The truth can be clean when it's finally set free." And for the first time since his death, the air around me felt still, peaceful.